Hello, I am doing this video in response to my latest video that got a lot of reaction and questions. And I'm going to try to address most of the questions that came up for most of you. I'm going to take it back. If you don't know the backstory, you might want to go watch that video first. But one of the questions is, what led me to no contact with my mom? And after doing a lot of personal therapy work, internal work, because I realized and I learned how much I needed to get to know myself, it got to a point where having a relationship with my mom became more and more challenging for me, because as I am uncovering all these emotions from childhood and events that happen, and I would bring them up, I would get resistance or denials or comments such as, well, that's your problem. I don't see it as a problem. That's on you. Which was totally fair. And I want to clarify, I don't have contact with my mother because, and I'll explain more on that, I don't think she's a bad person. I just don't think that relationship is good for me. But let's expand. I had been working for many, many years. I started because I was having problems with my husband, communicating, and emotions were bubbling up. And then by learning about myself, a lot of my childhood came up. I really wanted to work with my mom, and I invited her many times to have conversations. But she would, I think, either get afraid or she just didn't believe in doing that. And after 3 years of trying, I kept seeing her behaviors and things she was saying. I don't need to be specific right now. The more those things were happening as I progressed, getting to know myself and growing personally, the more I realized that I was living the definition of insanity, which is you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results. I was literally at the end of my rope every time. I didn't like how I felt around her, because every time it would be always that I was disappointing or not doing the right thing, or you name it. I always felt guarded around her because I would hear things that would hurt my feelings. I couldn't be free. I couldn't be myself. So after inviting and trying for many years to break through and kind of invite, working on myself, because I understood that you can only change yourself, that my transformation wasn't enough, and that this relationship we were deviating to the point where I could no longer be in contact with her. It's almost like we were speaking such different languages, and her way of operating and viewing life was not healthy, not positive, not accountable. I remember making the decision almost not even with my head, making the decisions with my core, where I'm like, I give up. I give up on this. I was chasing this, wanting this desperate love that I was never going to get. And one important thing I want to say is, I never expected or wanted a perfect mother. Perfection is far from what I want. In fact, the more imperfect, the better. because I just want a space to be myself. I wanted her to be herself. I wanted acceptance. I wanted to be able to be vulnerable and not in danger of being used against me, or I didn't want to be labeled. Like I said, my decision came out of the core of my being in search of truth and my truth, what resonated with me. And being engaged in this relationship, it wasn't allowing me to have the freedom to be me. I know I am not advocating for that to happen. I wanted to be very clear that I gave it my all. In fact, I'm a little bit of that personality of tenacity and perseverance. I walked away knowing that I really, really, really gave it my all. I try in every way to communicate without fighting anymore, without blaming. And it was the best thing I did because it allowed me to work on myself, distance myself from the constant frustration and anger and negative feelings, if you will. So I could work on them by observing the feelings, but without being aggravated or inflamed by it, if that makes sense. It was easier for me to work on myself. And what I discovered was that allowed me to have a healthier relationship with myself, which is what I wanted, and therefore an incredible relationship now with my children and my partner. Not that we didn't have difficulties also navigating throughout the years. Even after I stopped talking to my mother, I still had things with my husband, but we worked through them. And I wanted to model. That was important to me. I wanted to model a positive, healthy, empowered, accountable way of navigating life for my children. That was super important to me. I didn't want to be angry at my mother. I didn't want to be complaining. I think that answers that question. An important thing to clarify is I don't think my mom is a bad person. Do I think she's operating in a way that is not good? Yes, meaning there's always at fault, somebody's at fault causing her pain. I cannot engage with her because it's impossible to say things without getting an immediate reaction, almost like a tantrum, where there is no accountability. And I'm not saying she shouldn't have her feelings. We're human beings. But somehow her feelings are somebody else's fault, always. It is an impossible dynamic. She may or may not realize, but she puts all her happiness as my responsibility, and I can't do that. I'm only responsible for myself. Unfortunately, I learned to live my life without her in it. And, for many years, I kept assessing. And there's always hope there was always hope of maybe reconnecting at some point. I always had the hope that maybe she would reflect and work on herself and maybe approach back into wanting to work on the relationship. And she reaches out here and there, but I would have to hear transformation, and I don't hear that. I know this is going to be strange, but I cannot engage with her because, again, I speak such different language. I see the world so differently, and I cannot teach that to someone. The person has to learn that on their own. Nobody can teach you and tell you the formula. You have to want it, number one, and then go and practice it and live it. That's why it's so important to do personal work. And it's not something you do 1 month, 6 months, a year. This is a lifestyle, a way of living for the rest of your life. The beginning, I was trying to do in my last video, the beginning is at least trying to understand what emotional intelligence is, which is a deep topic. I can't go too deep into that one, otherwise I'll never answer the questions. But at least learning the language of emotions, separating your emotions from your thoughts, and that would be the minimum basic stuff to learn, I would say, in the beginning. When we found our therapist, my husband and I, as I explained in the last video, we started together, and then she's like, guys, this is individual issues. And we learned so much about how we're always, when you're in any relationship, you learn how you're always trying to get something out of the other person, and you will never, ever be satisfied. You will never, ever get what you want. And it's not an empowering way of living because you're dependent on that other person doing X, Y, and Z. So going into personal work, first you have to go deep inside and learn to reveal any traumas, any life things that happen to you, and learn what conclusions you made out of that, because there could be a lot of misunderstandings. And you learn to see them as gifts for your personal growth. And you learn to see yourself as this person with this journey to go deeper into connecting with your higher self. Now, if you don't believe in that, that's fine. It is important to understand emotions and thoughts and separate them, because they are little messengers of what the bigger picture is all about. Emotions tell you a lot about what you need to work on. Fears. Sometimes a fear has nothing to do with what on the surface it seems. Let's say the biggest fear, which is always, the biggest fear is not to be loved. So if you are afraid of being alone or not to be in a relationship because you don't want to feel unloved, you're always going to compromise yourself a little bit because that fear is kind of dominating your behavior. You're going to tolerate maybe certain things in your partner because, but I don't want to be alone. So by self-exploration and understanding your feelings, you empower yourself, because when you're aware of those things, you can at least look at them and not let them determine how you behave to keep yourself safe. I don't know if that's making any sense. Sorry for interrupting, but I wanted to take this quick moment to remind you to sign up for my jewelry line. A lot of you keep asking me about it, and I'm working really hard on getting that permit to work here in France. It's a long story. I'll explain it one day, but do sign up. And right now, I'm using this time to work on a lot of the projects in the house, but also updating my website, which you're not going to see right now. I'm going to launch it as soon as I'm allowed, and there will be a ton of new exciting pieces. So remember, the link will be below to sign up, and let's continue with the rest of the video. A lot of you have expressed that they're still with a lot of pain, that they are also not talking to whatever family member, their mom or some other person, but they still have the pain. And I understand that. For the longest time, my journey was such as, I started very angry. I would be pissed that I would have to spend all this time, effort, and money on therapy once a week to kind of heal from this unloving mom or ununderstanding mom or what. And then, after feeling that way for a long time, this sadness surfaces. And then I think I cried for 3 years straight in therapy, like cried and cried and cried until all the sadness almost got it slowly evaporated. Not that it ever goes completely away, but I relieve myself from those feelings. See, you have to feel them all. You can't just feel them once. You have to go rounds and rounds and rounds. After, feeling the anger, then the sadness, sometimes anger come back, sadness come back. It starts diminishing, and you start somehow magically seeing the bigger and bigger picture, where for me, what happened is I started seeing my mom as she did the best she could with her capabilities. And I'm not angry. Yeah, I wish I would have had a much joyous childhood, but this was the journey that my soul wanted. And I am glad I took advantage of it and did work. I mean, the trigger was really the birth of my baby, because with that was the Pandora box open up, and wanted to love my babies the way I could never feel love. And I'm not saying my mom doesn't love me, but the way she expresses love to me was not the way I wanted to be loved. So one thing I want to say is, once I made the decision to not talk to my mom, I wasn't planning not to talk to her for the rest of my life. In fact, to this day, I don't have I'll never talk to her again. But in the beginning, I went heavy on therapy. I really wanted to make sure I wasn't creating any stories, justifying anything. And I want to address something that somebody asked, or different people asked, about guilt. I never felt guilt, or if I did, I immediately moved on, because guilt is a protective thought, if you will. It is a way to not feel sadness or anger, probably anger. Like I said, I worked really hard on making sure that I was operating with my heart and that I was doing this with truth to myself. Because that's the thing. It's better that I don't pretend and have a relationship that is, that doesn't satisfy me. This maintenance relationship does not work for me. My relationships are absolutely important, real, and messy, and free, and honest. So if you're going to do this pretending with the elephant in the room, that doesn't work for me. So that was my truth. So going back to how practically I did it, I make sure I was not creating stories, that I was feeling my feelings, that, I kept very focused on self-exploration. And obviously this self-exploration is with the support and the help from a therapist, somebody who makes sure that you're not derailing, somebody who pushes you to go deeper. Because, when emotions come up, sometimes the head takes over. So that person makes sure that you're staying clean and focused and not going into your head or, getting into stories. So I explained a little bit. This was the hardest thing I think I've ever done in my life, because I knew making this decision would change my life forever. So again, I didn't do this just by impulse. This was work that I had been working for a long time. And it did affect in a positive way, my relationship with my husband, with myself, a relationship with myself, that was the juiciest one, because I felt brave. I felt that I could count on myself for myself. And then once you do that, I think the parent-child relationship, it's so intimate. And I really wanted that to work out for all my life. Once I had to let go because I got exhausted, I felt brave. I felt that I was enough and that I could carry on. And I'm not afraid of letting go any relationship now. If something doesn't work for me because it's not conducive to personal growth or I'm not able to be myself, I don't engage. I really don't. And for the rest of the family, yeah, we limit our interactions because the way we see now our lives in the world is so different to the rest of our families. It has affected, but I don't feel sad or lonely or for a while I did. For a while there was this back and forth, wishing, especially when my kids were younger. But I didn't want to compromise my truth. That was so important to me. My truth, my me being free to be myself, because that was important also for how my children were absorbing my behavior. I wanted them to have the role model that I thought was best, because I want them to be themselves 100%. A lot of you have asked what methods, what books I've been using. And I want to clarify something. There's a lot of good information out there, a lot of spiritual leaders, a lot of therapists, and it doesn't matter where you get this information. Obviously, use caution. You'll know what resonates. You know what's true. I think we all know what's true. I mean, I could say back in the day before I even found the therapist that helped us to get going, before her, I was listening to Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer, Tony Robbins. I mean, different successful people. That's where, especially Wayne Dyer, I really like how he would speak about emotions. Again, what matters is you absorb the information, but then you have to do the work. And the work takes discipline, dedication, intention, and time. I mean, this is something you're going to do for the rest of your life. Definitely one important aspect is you need an outside coach, a therapist, a spiritual leader. You additionally read books or watch content that speaks the same type of language. That's very important. But another important one is meditation. And that one was a hard one for me for a while because all these things would bubble up, my head would be busy. But meditation is crucial for creating internal space so then you can observe your emotions and learn to give them language. But if you don't, because the internal world is so braided, there's all these misunderstandings from how we're raised, society, controlling mechanisms, and you don't know what you absorb. Different people, interpretations is different. So what's important is to expose yourself to all this language, but then do the work. And to do the work, you need to find some coach, some therapist that will make sure you don't derail, that will clarify misunderstandings, that will support you when you are in the middle of the grief. I think that's what's important, is that you have to make friends that you are about to embark on a new lifestyle, and it requires dedication. There is no shortcuts. If you want to live an empowered life, if you want to be courageous and 100% yourself, this is what you have to do. You have to show up for yourself constantly and feed yourself with language that supports it. I think that's the best way I could answer. And don't be so caught up on the perfect therapist. And sometimes it takes a while to find the right person. The important thing is that you're on the journey and trust that the universe will send you. If you're really intentional, you will be guided to getting the right answers. That's the best way I could say it. To wrap it up, because this is a lot, I want to say, somebody asked if I would be open to reconcile with my mom. And of course, I'm always open to reconcile with my mom. But I would have to see energetically such transformation, intentionality, that I don't know. I let the universe handle that. I don't control it. Another question is, how do you operate from love when the other side, let's say the parent, needs boundaries? And this is all on you deciding, where is your boundary, what is okay. Always respectful, never name calling or anything like that, never reactive. You have to do a lot of personal work to know what you want, what you tolerate, or not even tolerate. You should not tolerate anything, actually. What is acceptable to you and what's not. Once you have that very clear, there is no budging. You are solid on what you want. It doesn't matter what relationship you're in, children, husband, mother, friends. You have to know what are must in that relationship for the relationship to exist. And that's it. It doesn't mean you have to be stiff. It just means these are my needs. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. I won't have that relationship. Simple as that. And always feel your heart. I don't calculate ever. I don't live my life calculating. I like living my life from my heart. A lot of people would say maybe that's dangerous or that is very painful. I learned that pain can be your friend. And the more you are open to having pain, the less pain you have. I don't know how to explain that one. Because, I don't know, it's just guarding against pain is energy I don't have. I'd rather put my energy on getting to know myself and trusting that what is meant for me will happen, and that's it. So I hope that answered the questions. I'm sure you guys will have more questions, and I'll try to do more of this if that's what interests you. And I wish you all a wonderful month, I guess. Until next time.